The San Diego Code School is a proud sponsor of the Sorry for Helping podcast. The San Diego Code School is leading companies to tech equity. The tech-enabled apprenticeship program is a venture whose heart is to do a lot of social good and do good work. You can help San Diego Code School secure funding for change by hiring developers, bringing a team in to relieve your backlog, or becoming a program sponsor. You can visit us on the web for more information at http://sdcs.io.
GoldenSquirrel.io is a proud sponsor of SorryForHelping.com. We're flipping the job search and hiring market on its head by having companies apply directly to you. You communicate what you'd like to be working on and what tools you'd like to be working with, as well as your desired salary. We'll keep it all anonymous till the employer reaches out for a conversation. If you'd like to be a little more proactive, you can search companies with benefits, tools, and the environment you're looking for in your next role. It's time to fix hiring. GoldenSquirrel.io.
Did you hear back from Vid Army?
I did not. Radio silence. So I gotta do a second reach out. They might be super busy. I mean, they are offering unlimited video services, so they're probably pretty busy. So
we did not factor customer acquisition into this deal. So the more I thought about that, the more it seemed like you don't want to do agency stuff, I feel like.
No, actually, we made our first offer, and it's to a trusted customer, I guess you call them, if that's the thing. And I said, hey, look, this is what we're thinking about doing, and I'm pretty sure you're not going to try and turn this into like a free CTO. So let me know what you think is a fair price, and like I'd be interested in hearing like what your thought behind it is. And I'm confident I won't have to fire you as a customer if we do it. So like pick a price and we'll figure out if we can make it work. And it's basically for a very specific product though. So it's for that like technical consulting services from a senior engineer. So helping to develop the junior engineers, because frankly it will help us. That's something we already talked about, providing them as a service. And it would just be super hard for me to like, every time someone pings me from their organization in Slack and says, I have a question, like, all right, let's start the timer. And then, when it's done, stop the timer and like bill them for like quarter hour or like half hour. Like it would just be painful for me to manage that. So if I could just figure out a way to make sure it's not being abused, then we could try it with certain customers. I don't think it's anything I'm looking to like scale out at this point, but like, I'm literally just trying to solve that problem of like, how do I deliver value for the customer and make sure that they can like leverage, because we're going to have supply of senior engineers, right? We're going to have a few seniors that are mentoring, and there'll be some bandwidth available. So it's like, how can we optimize that and make sure that we burn out our senior engineers, but we're adding value, I think, to organizations that like they could use a little bit of help with capacity. And then our brand becomes associated with like relieving that pain point of, hey, we need to grow, but we're not ready to bring in like a more senior technical person to help lead the team. Is there like an in-between stage? And then if they're like, hey, we also need some dev resources, or we also need X, Y, and Z, then we can provide those other services. It's all about like, hey, how can we help the businesses get better and grow teams? And so if we can find a way to package that as a product that makes it easy for people on their side and our side, win-win. But it's just so scary how abused it could be that I'm just like, how are these guys doing this?
Have you had any conversations with companies or reach outs with like the accessibility stuff that we talked about?
Remind me again, what do you mean by accessibility?
Making websites, web pages accessible, because it's the law that they have to have it.
We were thinking that was going to be like our main bread and butter, but now we've changed our approach. And so I'm sure we'll circle back if like what we're currently doing, it doesn't pick up, but we've kind of decided strategically. So this is public knowledge now, or it will be today. I think we're going to put some announcements out. So we've got a partnership formed with ServiceNow. And so they're going to provide a week of training for our current batch of apprentices, plus some. So they're going to do like a class for like 20 people. And then they'll get them certified. So we've had some people doing pre-work to make sure that they're ready for not just a basic certification, but like a developer certification. So it's a pretty good deal because normally you don't get this developer training for free. It's a pretty expensive thing. So they're going to put that on exclusively for our folks. And then they're going to introduce us to their network of service providers. So that's like companies like Deloitte and Accenture and KMG and a bunch of those big agencies that do this kind of technical implementations and integrations. And so we've already kind of thought that this is a path we wanted to go down with, like in the e-commerce space. You've got Miva here in San Diego. And so they do some development in shop and handle some things for clients, but some clients have their own teams. Just talked to Telium yesterday, and Telium, same thing. They have a really a product that requires a lot of technical expertise to implement, but they're mainly a platform company. They're not like a, you know, bespoke custom services. And so if we can create the ability for us to train people on things like AWS, Google Compute Cloud, ServiceNow, Salesforce, SharePoint, then I feel like there's more dollars there. And so it makes a little bit more sense. And the domain is very like narrow. So we can get people like really good at a specific like product and get really good at teaching like how to get somebody onboarded with AWS and do some basic architectural things. So I feel like that's kind of the lane that we're trying to run down at this point, is like, let's not focus on like super generalist accessibility. I think it's a good fallback. You know, it's pretty easy stuff, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I'm trying to chase the money at this point, right? Because I feel like that will give us the best chance of having enough cash to make sure that it's a low risk to hire people. And then as we start like developing more in that direction, I feel like it's going to build some pretty strong relationships with some of these larger employers. And then I can be like, NC, they know how to do your work. So now you guys should start hiring these folks.
Right.
If that makes sense. So I'm trying to line up all of the moons and stars. And I feel like that's probably gonna be more in line with what the business actually does than like the thing I thought initially, which is like, oh yeah, they all need accessibility. Like it's something they need, but they don't really want to do it. So if they did, they fix their sites and they wouldn't have accessibility issues.
Well, you have to make them aware of the problem.
This is true. This is true. But that's a
but we talked about that. That would require a sales team on your side.
Correct. And you know, we could build some SaaS product around that. I'm sure there's probably a few that exist, and they're probably not as good as what we could build. So
I'm sure there's some that exist somewhere.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's what's going on with that. So we're pretty excited. Like we just got the green light to make the announcement about the special hackathon training. Talked to Fred at the Business Journal. So hopefully Fred will, you know, talk about the story. And so it should be, you know, things are really starting to pick up really fast. Like on my typical day, I'll have like 9 to 10 phone calls. I've got this like 20-minute phone call thing where just like we just jump on the phone. It's long enough to do introductions, do a short pitch of like what it is we actually do, how companies can get involved. And then
can you give us that now? What does that sound like?
Okay, so I will usually talk a little bit about my background, so I don't want to bore folks with that, but I'll usually talk about.
Well, you've talked about it before on this format.
So I'll give my background. I'll give a very abbreviated version of like how I got to like where we're at right now with the code school, and then talk about a couple of the pain points of apprenticeships, and then talk about how that solution solves some of the challenges that folks have in terms of finding diverse talent, and then making sure that they have the right skill set that is actually being used on the job today so they can add value as soon as they hit the deck. And then I'll usually ask if they know anything about mob programming, because I think that's an exciting aspect of like how they're learning. And so if they don't, I'll talk a little bit about, you know, working as a team together at the same time. I think that's an exciting way to talk about how those and you can really get into the skills that they're learning are, you know, how to learn together, you know, how to cross collaborate. And I think there's some unique advantages to just like stepping through that process and what are the benefits of like working together on a team. And it also helps them to understand how, if they did use our services, the gaps in their mind might be like, well, is this person going to have all the knowledge they need to build? And like, how much support, that question comes up a lot. How much support are they going to get from senior engineers? And then I can talk through the question that they often have, which is, like, are they going to be reaching out to our engineers and like nagging them with questions? And then I'm like, no, like that's why we've designed this product, that we take care of that. And if anything, we as senior engineers will be reaching out to your product team, to ask your product team for like very specific questions about like, how would you like this implemented? It's not going to be as much technical stuff. It's going to be like, hey, we just need to understand, like, do you want it to be red or do you want it to be blue? Like, this is a business decision that you guys have to make. So, you know, let us know so that we can make sure that they stay productive. So I feel like it answers a lot of the, like, the closing objections, I guess you'd say, that we think are going to happen in the sales process. And so far, everybody's really excited in that initial conversation, but then they always have to go back, and the person I'm talking to is usually the champion. And so they still have to go back and make sure if they're not the decision maker, that they can get the decision maker on board. So,
Gotcha. I was going to say, what are they most excited about? And what are they most like, oh, this is the only thing I see hanging us up?
I think from the conversation I've had so far, I think they're very excited about the fact that they can get access to talent. So even though they're usually like, oh, we need senior engineers, they really like the fact that like there's diverse talent, and they're like, oh, if we could get more women, we could get more people that don't look like our current team. And they also specifically talk a lot more about the skill set. They're like, we know we have a lot of really sharp people, but we don't have that many people that are like mid-level engineers, and we don't do a good job. We have some new people, and some people have been here for a while. We don't have that much in the middle. And so they self-identify that like it seems that there's an imbalance in their teams, but they also always acknowledge they know there's going to be some pain involved in like talking to other people within the organization. It's very rare that they're like, oh yeah, everybody's going to be on board with this, but it happens. I mean, if I'm having 10 calls a day, then a couple of them are usually like, oh yeah, we're ready to go. Like, what can we do today? Or they'll be like, what can we do right now? Because I know it's going to take me like 3 or 4 months to convince someone to make this happen in terms of like buying developer services from you. And then I'll usually say, well, the other option is you can make a donation to the nonprofit. And then we have the numbers, and we can talk about the fact that like, if you donate $10,000, it creates about $150,000 worth of wage opportunity for us. And in addition to that, it creates like $360,000 worth of follow-on revenue in the local ecosystem. If you use the EDC's multiplier, which is like for every technical job that you create in San Diego, it creates 2.4 other jobs in San Diego, right? And so if you use the amount that, you know, the wages from that first job, and you multiply that by 2 times 4, 2.4, now you end up in a situation where if someone donates $250,000 to this sort of project, it creates over $9 million worth of economic value and revenue for the ecosystem in San Diego. So those are like compelling numbers, right? Like $250,000 impact investment, and your impact is $9 million to the local economy. Obviously, it's great to be able to brag that like while everybody else is like laying people off and firing people, like I hired 3 people within this last month, and I'm hiring 4 more people next month. So like we're growing, and we're going to do this. And so who doesn't want to like jump on board? Like, get in, the water's warm. Like, we're going to do this. So
Right. That's awesome.
now, part that's not awesome is we do have to get approved from the VPP. So now I'm just like, okay,
oh, man.
I hired an agency, and I'm like, I'm going to give you the catalog because that's the first thing they need to do. And they're like, all right,
why do you have to get approved?
Because we need to be able to access like state and federal funds and like other, like if we want to get ETPL funds, we got to get approved.
All right. So we'll just leave it at that so we can actually keep this in this time.
Yeah, for sure.
The question I was going to have was, it does seem weird. That was actually because we were sending out the survey for the thing I'm working on to developers that have 2-3 years of experience, and they know they're not junior, but they also know they're not senior. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, we don't see any mid-level jobs posted anywhere. Yeah. And it does seem like, from my perspective, that if you're going to hire a mid-level engineer, that you kind of want to hire the best prospect would be somebody internally that's a junior, and like upgrade them. Because if you hire a junior from another company, they're going to spend the first 6 months just getting domain expertise of what's unique about your company and your tech stack and your right.
So there's always that cost. There's cost associated with ramping them up, and depending on how you work, like if you're fortunate enough to be on like mobs, you can ramp somebody up really fast because they're not working in isolation and distracting someone. They're just immediately integrated and like they're learning from the whole team. So you can cross train people super fast. But I think it's hard to say because so many companies do this like very ineffectively that it's almost like they all have different problems that they're creating.
Yeah.
I think the problem they generally my hypothesis, and I don't know if I shared this before, but my hypothesis is companies realize and they self-evaluate that we are terrible at developing talent. So they start from that perspective. Their lens, everything they look at is like, we are terrible at developing people. And so then they start attacking problems like, well, does that mean that like we have to hire better junior engineers and they have to be at a certain skill level before we can bring them in? Does that mean that we can't hire junior engineers at all, so we can only hire seniors? And they start with that like, we're terrible at developing people, so we're left with these options instead of thinking about like, well, how do we get better at developing people? Like, how do we fix that problem so it makes all the other problems go away? And
Right.
so it's tough because they spend a lot in these senior engineering resources, but then senior engineers don't always make good team leads and they don't make a good way to develop people. So, you know, the best thing to do would be have better mid-level management that has the capacity to develop skills in people and coach people, or work with a company that can do that. So you gain the capacity to actually like make decisions, not just based on what your current skill set is. So let's assume they're making the decision based on their current skill set. I think they kind of try and gamble quickly, like efficiently, right? So if you can gamble efficiently, I think the better way of saying that is they try and mitigate their risk, right? So they try and find, maybe I know this company grooms a lot of junior engineers and they get them to successfully get to X, Y, and Z. So I'm just going to try and poach juniors from them, right? Because hopefully they're far enough in their process where like they've learned like the secret sauce of like learning how to learn. And so when they come in, like we can just keep that going. We just have to maintain whatever growth that they're on. And it's easy to tell, like we both know the skills that it takes for someone to be like on their own self-developing themselves, right? So if I'm interviewing someone and they're like, yeah, I'm super junior and I just got this job and I've been there for 6 months, but I go to all the meetups and I work on these passion projects, and you look at their GitHub and it looks good. It's like, this is easy. Like I'm not gonna have to do very much to develop this person. Like they're on they're on the path. So I feel like some of them are smart enough that they identify that, they see that, and they also know like, but if we bring him in, like he's gonna have to keep developing on his own. Like we don't have the talent to like get him there. It is very weird though when people are like, I'm looking for a mid-level engineer, and my question is always like, why? Like, what is your motivation for like mid? Is it because you don't have the money to pay for a senior? Is it because it's like this?
Yes.
It's like this weird, like I really want to know the motivation there, because it's like it seems like it's like a straight money thing where it's just like we just don't have money for a senior, and we have then like no patience or ability to groom a junior. So it's a Goldilocks where like right in the middle, mid, that's what we must need. And it's like, no, like mid sometimes can be just as hard as like a junior, because the mid might have some terrible habits, right? And so you don't know what you're getting with the mid. You don't know if they're going to stay mid. They're mid, but they've been a mid for like 5 years and they're never going to be a senior because they have terrible habits and they're not going to grow. So I don't know, mid is scary. When people say that, I'm always like pepper them with questions like, why mid? Like what's your rationale for going after a mid-level? Because there aren't that many. Most people are just like, I know what I want. I want a senior level engineer because it's all we can handle.
Right.
Like we just raised a bunch of money. We got to build stuff fast.
We need 20 people, so we just need bodies.
Right. And they got to be super good because like they got to just be able to go in a room.
They don't have the bandwidth to train them. Right.
Yeah. They just got to be able to go in this room and like come out like little elves with stuff that I can like go sell to make back this money I just borrowed.
So because this is kind of in line with this, and I was going to ask you this anyways, and it was the thing I talked about asking Kyle last time, was I'm curious, in talking to a bunch of recruiters and internal HR people, they lose a lot of candidates because they'll have too many interviews. So they'll have like 7 rounds of interviews.
Oh, yeah,
engineers will be like, I'm out. So I'm curious from your perspective, what is like the if you had to set a template for all all employees to kind of have these guidelines that wouldn't scare away engineers, but also screen them well, what does that look like for you? For a senior engineer?
Oh, okay. So for senior engineer, I think we had a pretty good process that like the business team, like the engineering team, came up with at Zito where we had to hire a senior, and Dan Carr was like, let's just come up with a process so that we can like figure out how to quickly do this. And I think it was a single on-site. I don't think we had multiple on-sites. So we did a phone screen and a single on-site, and it was usually just 2 engineers in the on-site interview with the individual. We did give them a project. So we thought it made sense and the project aligned with like what we did. So we had them build like a little 3-step funnel, and in that worked. The senior engineers could like knock that out really fast. Actually, you know what? I think we might have skipped it for the senior engineers. I think we might have just not had, I think that was just the juniors, but it was basically a phone interview and an on-site. I think if you're asking for more than that, then it's like you're trying to put the senior engineer in some kind of a box where it's like they have to have this elite skill that they can demonstrate to you before you hire them. And it's just like, yeah, most seniors don't want to like jump through those hoops. Some are okay with it, but I think most of us are just like, look, I've been doing a lot of work here. This is not my first trip to the rodeo. So like,
I almost feel like the more high quality the engineers, the less likely they are to go through the hoops.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's kind of like if they're willing to go through all the hoops, it's less percentage-wise chance that
that's
have what you're looking for.
I mean, if you just look at just the like sheer, this is how the stock market works, right? Supply and demand. If you know you're good, you are not going to be on the market for that long, and people need to like move very, very quickly to get that talent. They will not stay out there. Now, the goal could be different for some folks, and I don't know that they're always the best engineers, but like they have their heart set that like I want to be at Netflix or I want to be at Google, and they create all of these like layers and you can work under contract there and then apply for a position and not get it, and it's just like, how does that happen? Like, how could you have someone working as a contractor but then not willing to hire them like on your product when they apply for the role? Like, that's fundamentally flawed, right? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So
separate issue. Netflix can take care of itself.
Yeah, I saw that story and I was just like, what is going on with that? But hey, I don't have that passion to be at that kind of shop. So it's like not even on my radar of like thinking about that.
So it'd be reasonable for somebody to do a phone screen if it was you as the applicant and do an on-site code test or some kind of project in person.
Yeah, and if you're smart, the way you phrase it is not like a phone interview and an on-site interview. You're like, I'd like to just chat and have a conversation with you. Like, can we have a call? And then can we bring you in and have a conversation with a couple more of our engineers, right? And get away from this, like, it's a phone screen and it's an interview and it's going to be like 4 hours, and like, because you're setting yourself up for like resistance from the individual, because you're not really treating with the respect of like, they've put in the work. Like, it's taken a lot of work for them to gain the skill to be where they're at. That's probably not how you would like treat, a lawyer that you wanted to woo to come work at your practice, or a doctor that you wanted to come work at your practice. You would probably treat them differently. So like, just treat people with a little bit of respect and like, answer back to them when they come in the interview, and just let them know like, hey, I'm glad you came in. We had a great conversation with you. Like, we gained a lot of insight from your skill set. And right now we just don't see a fit on our team, but we'd love to have a conversation down the line if that makes sense again, right? And like close it and don't like leave them hanging. That like ghosting thing pisses everybody off. So
that's what's crazy is the 2 biggest annoyances when I pulled engineers so far were too many rounds of interviews and takes too long to hear back. And I was like, those are probably the most 2 controllable parts of interviewing people, is how many rounds, and then just calling them back when right? Like,
I just don't understand the multiple interview thing. Like, I can get into a room and talk to an engineer and kind of figure out whether or not I could like see him fitting within the organization and being able to like be productive and get work done. And like, what's the worst that happens? They lie and they say they have a skill set that they don't have, and they kind of fool you during the interview. But it's super obvious after the interview when they don't have that skill set, and they just fire them. And like, it's part of the churn, but like, it's not the end of the world if you made a bad hiring decision. You just fire them fast. You hire slow, fire fast. But hiring slow doesn't mean we have to do 7 interviews.
It was a complaint. It was a complaint I heard, but it was because the company was super elitist on their product, and just like everybody on the team needs to be just as good or better than here. And it was all of these database and SQL experts.
Sure.
And so they were giving like super complex. And by round number 5, the guy was like, "I don't even want to work with these people."
Yeah.
So,
and the other thing that can happen in larger organizations is once someone comes in and they talk to one team, then they're like, yeah, you're not a good fit for us, but I think there's another team that you might be a good fit for. And so then they like have them go over theirs. But it's like, you could mitigate that. Like you could just say, we're going to do first rounds. The highest priority is like this team. And then after that, if anybody else wants in, we'll just do a panel interview and like, we'll bring the person in one more time and then you can get on a panel. And that way it's at least a little bit in parallel so that they're only having to do 2 interviews instead of having to do, well, you're going to interview with this team. And if they don't like you, then you can interview with this team. And if they don't like you, then you can interview with this team. And it's just like, that's like, if I was in that scenario, it'd be like, every time I'm like rebooting and telling my story again about what I'm working on, what I'm interested in. It's just
right.
Like, slog. So,
okay. We got 5 minutes left. So
right.
I really want to review this because we talked about it last time and you'll like it.
All right.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen and then I'm going to read it just so we're doing both. Can you see it?
I can.
Awesome. So this was the guy that we built the MVP for, or you along with the students built the MVP to be more specific.
Which one? Which product or project? Do you remember what it was?
Ficus. Yeah, Ficus.
Oh, okay. Ficus. All right. Got it.
All right. So with Startup Week, this is an email I wrote to him after we ate at Bubs with him, because I wanted to give an example of the emails I write that are like a year out. And
Sure.
This was the best one I could think of. So with Startup Week coming, that's probably your best bet at finding someone if a freshman in college doesn't work out. That's right, because he was trying to find a freshman in college to build his app, which we advised against.
Yeah.
Here's a summary of the advice I'll give you. Learn to code as soon as possible and continue to build the MVP out on your own. Start doing whatever you can afford in advertising, even if it's like $50 a month using AdWords or preferably Facebook ads, with a video explaining what the app does. 3, create a landing page where they can sign up with their email. Sounds like you've already done this. 4, email every person for feedback on what could make the app more engaging for them at least once a month. 5, build that feature with your coding skills. 6, repeat 4 and 5 until you have enough momentum to raise money or generate money. I really just want to write this out so we can time capsule them in a way and look back at this email in a few years and see if you agree or disagree. I'm wrong all the time. It'll be super entertaining to look back a year from now. Either way, trust me on that one. If you get stuck and need advice, email me anytime. So that was May 25th, 2018, and it's currently June 11th, I think, 2020. And it looks like he started iterating on it and got on a couple, but I don't think it's not available anymore though.
Oh, okay.
So we should reach out to him and see how that went. Because, because he actually, I do remember looking at it a year, because I got that email the year after, which Origin wasn't around then, in 2019.
Okay.
And so when I looked at it last year, he had improved on it and there were additional features to it. So I was like, oh, this is great. Like he found somebody or is doing it himself. So I would be curious to reach out to him, see how he's doing. But anyways, all still advice I would probably give him to this day.
Yeah, I think it's valid advice. And I thought it was really interesting. I can remember when the students were working on the project, it's just briefly, it's kind of like a way to have like a Robinhood app that you can play with play money initially until you get like your skill level to where you feel like it's good to go. And then you can actually start making real trades on it. So it'd be interesting to find out like where he stopped on his MVP and really just started trying to validate whether or not that fit with the marketplace. But the fact that it's not in the store, it could be a variety of reasons for that. Like maybe he just couldn't keep updating it, or for whatever reason the store might have taken it down because it deals with money and stuff. So who knows? But
it would have been perfect for the pandemic, though. I know I'm in like a couple group chats with a bunch of new Robinhood investors.
Oh God! Don't get me started on the stock market. It makes 0 sense to me. It's like the unemployment rate has gone up by 50%, and the stock market is like raging that day, and it's a bull market. And I'm like, how does this make any sense at all?
I don't think you're basically giving like a too long didn't read for our group chat. Like, what is happening? Everybody like buying shorts on Tesla because they can't produce cars for like a month or two, and now it's all time high. Nobody knows what's happening.
Yeah, it's insane.
The theory is that everybody can't bet on sports, so they're just putting it all on the markets.
I mean, you are so much better just going to Vegas and literally going to the roulette table, which has some of the worst odds, and just picking some numbers.
Dude, did you see like Hertz went up 600% after they filed for bankruptcy? It's like the world
How's that gonna work?
I don't know. It's back down, but they announced that they were filing for bankruptcy, and then they went up to higher than before they announced it.
It just makes zero sense. I literally feel like super uneducated on finance when you say that, because I'm just like, these are people that have money. Like, how do they keep their money if they make these poor decisions?
Dude, look at this. This is can you see the stock chart? Oh no.
It's coming. There you go. Yeah.
This is when they filed for bankruptcy right here, this drop.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh. Are you seriously?
There you go. There's a drop.
Hang on, this is only one day. Oh my gosh, why is this so complicated? Okay. This is when they filed for bankruptcy, and this was June 8th. So they're back down because people are like, so the theory was because people were they were liquidating all their cars, so they had cash. So people were like, oh, what if they sell all their cars and have this cash, and there's a rebound when they have cash in the bank and they don't need to be bankrupt anymore? That was like the ongoing theory.
Sure.
That was the only thing I could find, and I found it on Reddit to give you an idea of how deep I had to dig to try and figure out what was happening there.